The rain came down in sheets, streaking the diner windows like tears. Ava wiped the counter for the third time, eyes heavy from another double shift. The place was nearly empty, just the hum of the refrigerator, the flicker of a dying neon sign, and the occasional clink of coffee cups. Then the bell above the door rang. A man walked in, expensive suit, soaked, shoes polished, face unreadable. He looked out of place, like Wall Street had wandered into a truck stop. Ava barely glanced at him. "Sit anywhere." He didn't smile, just took the booth in the corner and scanned the laminated menu like it offended him. When she brought him black coffee, he didn't thank her. When he ordered a sandwich, he complained it was dry. And when the check came, for $8.45, he dropped a folded wad of $100 bills on the table. Ava stared at it. Slowly, she picked it up, walked to his table, and calmly placed it back in front of him. "I'm not here to be bought," she said, "especially not by someone who treats people like they're invisible." The man blinked. She turned and walked away, heart pounding, wondering if she'd just made a mistake that could cost her job. But she didn't look back. She never saw the way he stared at her, stunned, curious, and maybe a little impressed. Gabriel Mercer was used to reactions. Shock, awe, flattery, obedience. He was the kind of man people catered to before he even asked. His face rarely made headlines. He avoided cameras, interviews, and gossip, but his money always spoke louder than his presence. That night, though, sitting in a greasy booth with a perfectly untouched sandwich, something unusual had happened. Someone had told him no. She didn't recognize him, didn't care who he was, and that made her unforgettable. By the time he reached his penthouse, her words still echoed in his head. "I'm not here to be bought." It wasn't just the refusal, it was the conviction. He replayed her face in his memory. Calm, confident, tired, but dignified. She hadn't been rude, she'd been real. That kind of authenticity? Rare. Priceless. Gabriel leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled under his chin. His assistant, Mia, walked in with reports from their Hong Kong merger. "Burn it," he muttered. She blinked. "Sorry?" He waved her off. "Nothing, just thinking." But it wasn't nothing. Because the next morning, Ava would find something at the diner. A small bouquet of white tulips with a note tucked inside. No name, no number, just a sentence. "You're not like the others. I'd like to apologize. G." Ava stared at it, then calmly tossed the bouquet in the trash, and went back to work, completely unaware that the man who sent it had just made her the center of his world. Ava didn't need flowers. She needed rent money, a working heater, and 2 hours of uninterrupted sleep. Not mysterious apologies from arrogant rich men who thought charm came wrapped in petals and lowercase initials. So when the tulips landed in the trash, she didn't think twice. But Gabriel Mercer did. From the tinted glass of his black SUV parked across the street, he saw her reaction. No hesitation, no smile, no curiosity, just a quiet rejection. And somehow, it didn't offend him. It fascinated him. "She threw them away," his driver Mike said cautiously. Gabriel's lips lifted in the faintest smile. Good. That means she's still real. Mike glanced at him in the rearview mirror. "You sure she's the type to be interested in a guy like you?" "I'm not interested in her being interested," Gabriel replied. "I'm interested in understanding why she said no." Back inside the diner, Ava poured coffee for a regular and rubbed her aching neck. The night before had cost her sleep, and now flowers from a stranger stirred questions she didn't want. What kind of man sends expensive flowers without a name? And why did that coffee shop moment bother her so much? Because deep down, she'd seen the look in his eyes. Cold, calculating, but also tired, as if he was used to being feared, not challenged. And for a split second, she thought she saw someone lonely. But she brushed it off. Because men like that, they don't fall for waitresses. And women like her, they don't have the luxury of wondering what if. 3 days later, Ava was working the closing shift again when she noticed him, back in the corner booth. No flashy suit this time, just a plain black hoodie, jeans, and sneakers that still somehow looked expensive. He kept his head low, eyes hidden under the brim of a cap. He didn't order anything for nearly 20 minutes, just watched. Not in a creepy way, not even with interest really, with intention. Ava pretended not to notice, but every time she turned her back, she could feel it, the weight of his stare, not predatory, but searching. Finally, she walked over, pad in hand. No menus tonight. We're out of almost everything. He looked up, and this time, she recognized him. Her breath caught for half a second, not because he was famous, but because he'd come back. The man who tried to buy her dignity, now sitting alone, quiet, in a nearly empty diner. "What do you want?" she asked, arms crossed. He didn't flinch, just said, "A coffee, and the truth." Ava raised an eyebrow. "About why you gave the money back." She studied him. "Why does it matter?" "Because no one ever has." She tilted her head, watching the way he didn't fidget, didn't blink too fast. He was serious. So she leaned in slightly and said, "Because I've worked too hard to become someone I'm proud of." And she walked away. No more words. But that one sentence, it burned in his chest like a match in a room full of gas. The next night, the diner buzzed with post-rain chatter. Umbrellas dripped near the door, coffee steamed from mismatched mugs, and Ava moved like a quiet force through the chaos. Gabriel returned, but this time she didn't see him. Not really, because he came in disguise, not just in clothes, but in presence. Hoodie up, glasses on, seated in the shadowed booth where the flickering light didn't reach. He watched as she served an elderly couple without rushing, picked up a crying child's toy and returned it with a warm smile, cleaned up someone else's mess without a complaint. Then his moment came. He accidentally spilled his coffee, let it drip slowly across the table, over the edge, to the floor. Ava was already halfway there before he could say a word, kneeling, cloth in hand. No hesitation, no groan, no visible frustration. Just her calm, careful voice. "No worries, I'll get it cleaned up." Gabriel stared, not at her hands or the mess, but at her eyes. Still tired, still kind, still untouched by cynicism. She stood, wiped her palms on her apron, and gave him the same grace she gave strangers every night. "Anything else I can get you?" she asked, meeting his gaze, and this time seeing through the glasses. Pause. Recognition. She didn't flinch, just said, "Still testing people, I see." Gabriel almost smiled. "Still passing," he replied, and for the first time, she didn't walk away. She pulled up a chair, just for a second, and said, "So, what's your story then?" He didn't know how to answer, because he'd just realized he'd spent his whole life building everything except a story worth telling. The diner was almost empty when Ava clocked out that night. Rain again, of course. She pulled her coat tight and stepped out the back door, umbrella long since broken, when a sleek black car pulled up alongside the curb. The window rolled down. Gabriel. No driver this time, just him, in the rain. She paused, unsure. He leaned toward the open window, his voice low and careful. "Let me show you something." Ava crossed her arms. "You're trying to impress me?" He shook his head. "I'm trying to understand something, and I think you're the only person who can help me." She didn't move, so he added, "Not a date, not a deal, just 10 minutes." 10 minutes turned into 20, because she got in, and he didn't drive her to some mansion or hotel. He drove to a city shelter. Not a fancy gala or ribbon cutting, just a quiet brick building where Gabriel had been quietly donating money for years, where his mother once volunteered before her death. They stood in silence, watching volunteers pass out blankets, soup, kind words. He turned to her. "They tell me I've saved lives with this place, but I've never once stepped inside, never once asked their names." She studied him. His eyes weren't cold now, just tired, wounded. "And you think I can teach you to tear?" she asked softly. He met her gaze. "No, I think you already have." For the first time, Ava looked at him, not as a billionaire, not as a mystery, but as a man, and something in her chest shifted, just a little. Over the next few weeks, they saw each other, but never in the ways one would expect. No champagne, no gowns. Coffee walks before sunrise, sandwiches eaten on city benches, a late-night game of chess on a park table neither of them really knew how to play. Gabriel didn't push. He listened, observed. And Ava? She kept her distance. Not in words, in posture, in how she always sat with a chair between them, in how she never let her phone die, in case she needed an out, in how she smiled but never laughed too loudly. He noticed it all. One evening, they passed a bakery just before closing. Gabriel insisted on buying her the last almond croissant. She took it, thanked him, then paused. "Why me?" she finally asked. He stopped walking. Looked at her, not like a man trying to seduce, but like someone honoring what stood in front of him. "Because you don't need me," he said, "and that's the only kind of person worth giving everything to." Ava's walls cracked, just a little. But even then, she told herself, this won't last. Men like him always go back to their world. Women like me are just stories they forget. What she didn't know was this. He wasn't writing a chapter. He was rewriting his ending. Things were quiet. Too quiet. The kind of stillness that makes you wonder when life will remind you that peace can be temporary. It came on a Tuesday. The headline wasn't even about her. It was about him. Billionaire CEO Gabriel Mercer spotted with mystery woman. They'd been seen near the shelter, a blurry photo, but Ava's face was clear enough. And suddenly her phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Old friends, distant relatives, the ex-boyfriend who once ghosted her and stole her rent money, now calling like he cared. He showed up at the diner, slick smile, greasy charm, and a laugh that made her stomach turn. "You've done well, Ava," he said. "Finally found a man to fix your mess." She nearly slapped him, but she didn't have to, because Gabriel stepped in, silent, calm, and deadly cold. He didn't yell, didn't threaten. He simply stepped between them and said, "Leave." The man scoffed. "Who are you, her bodyguard?" Gabriel didn't blink. "No, I'm the one who sees her, the one you lost the right to speak to the moment you left her hungry and lied about love." And with that, he handed Ava his coat and walked her out. They didn't speak for the next 2 blocks. But when she finally whispered, "I didn't want to drag you into my past," Gabriel just said, "You're not dragging me anywhere. I'm choosing to walk with you." And that's when she stopped fearing how it would end and started wondering what it might become. 2 months passed. The world kept spinning, but for Ava, it had changed colors. Softer, warmer. Not perfect, but real. She still worked part-time at the diner, even after Gabriel offered her anything else. She said it reminded her of who she was. He said nothing, but showed up at the counter sometimes just to leave a tip and a smile. Then, one evening, he asked her to meet him on the rooftop of his building. It wasn't fancy, no cameras, just the night skyline and the hum of city lights. He stood by the railing, hands in his pockets, looking uncharacteristically unsure. "Do you ever think about what comes next?" he asked. Ava hesitated. "Next as in—" He turned to her, held out a small velvet box. Her breath caught. She opened it. It was empty. Confused, she looked up at him. And Gabriel, the billionaire, the guarded man who once hid behind money, said, "I didn't put anything in it, because I don't want to offer you something you haven't already given me." She blinked. "What does that mean?" "It means you already gave me a reason to be better. You already gave me peace. You already gave me you. I don't want to buy your yes. I want to earn it, if you ever want to give it." He stepped back. No pressure, no assumptions. Just a box, an invitation, a choice. And Ava? She didn't cry, but her hand closed around that box like it was already full. 3 weeks later, Gabriel walked into the little cafe that Ava loved. It wasn't his style. Too humble, too quiet, but he came anyway. She was already there, at the corner table, hair pulled up, a book in her lap, and beside her coffee, the box. He froze. She looked up, met his eyes, and smiled, the kind of smile that said everything without a single word. Gabriel approached slowly, his heartbeat louder than the cafe music. She opened the box. Inside was the ring. Simple, elegant, not flashy, and on her finger, it already looked like it belonged. I didn't need time to decide, Ava said softly. I just needed to believe this was real. Gabriel sat across from her, his voice thick with something he didn't know how to name. It's real. She reached across the table, took his hand. No press releases, no parties, she said. I just want something honest. Gabriel nodded. Then that's what you'll get. They didn't need a ceremony to seal it. That morning, in a quiet cafe, beneath the scent of pastries and the buzz of strangers' conversations, a billionaire and a woman who once refused his money chose each other. Not for power, not for rescue, but for something far rarer, respect. And in that moment, wealth meant nothing, because the richest thing either of them had was each other.